whom I'd like to invite to the stage at this time. First, we have, in no particular order, but first we have Mr. Rapad Undersecretary of State at the Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications in Cambodia. We have Director Idrissa Dia from the Islamic Development Bank. Thank you for joining us. We have the Honorable Permanent Secretary Konono Ramashmole from the Ministry of Information Communications Technology in Lesotho. We have Mr. Willy Liamadi, the Deputy Director at DPI in Indonesia. And soon we'll have Puneet Joshi could join us, the CTO of Open G2P. But before we begin, I'd like to start with the construct of how we're thinking about food security and strengthening food systems. This gives us an overview of the various ways in which digital public infrastructure can support us in moving towards greater progress to achieving some very overwhelming goals. As WFP stated in 2023, there were about nearly 300 million individuals around the world facing acute food insecurity, 2.3 billion facing moderate food security challenges. And by 2030, a significant increase in these numbers. So how do we address global food insecurity? Well, it begins with a construct of food systems, which aims to incorporate both processes as well as infrastructure to both feed a population and drive food sufficiency. This requires dialogue at a national and regional level, and is typically one that easily transcends ministries of agriculture alone. It needs to include consideration for the underlying infrastructure, access to energy, the role of youth and gender, labor and employment considerations, trade, finance, the role of treasury, and of course the role of digital technologies, emerging tech, as we will discuss today. It's also to acknowledge that as we discuss how food systems are constructed, we're thinking of everything from crops to livestock to fisheries and a range of subsectors as well. On the African continent, AGRA, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, has been leading the charge in supporting countries to develop their food system strategies. This ties to their work in building national investment plans. These are important to guide both funding and investment, working with FSPs, bilaterals, philanthropy, and requires a range of capital in order to address the issues. They've been working in a range of countries and developing a framework that breaks down these systems to include aspects such as food supply, looking at the environment, considering health, as well as social, economic, and political subsystems. This offers us a range of ways to start thinking about the topic of this forum and this summit, which is the role of digital public infrastructure. How do we think of these technologies as an enabler to addressing and strengthening food security and food systems? There are 5 areas that come to mind for me, some of which we'll hear more about today. One is access to inputs, where countries like Tanzania have been working on input subsidies with seeds and fertilizers for smallholder farmers based on farmer registrations that align with national ID numbers. A second area is access to finance, which is a common issue that enables services greatly, including farmer registration, verification, and others. A third includes access to markets, which includes access of strengthening supply chains, and recognizes strategies built on the basis of food sufficiency, import substitution, access to local regional markets. The fourth being farmer capacity building. While many extension services revolve around recruiting and deploying workers, this is appreciated as a mid to long-term solution. Tech solutions are being deployed to provide farmers with the skills that include input verification, good agronomic practices, and understanding market pricing, etc. And finally, land access and ownership. And this is a critical piece, including the role of women and navigating gender in the ownership and rights for land access, and including surveys and understanding of titles and deeds, for which technology and digital public infrastructure in particular can provide tremendous support. So today, as I mentioned, I am joined by a panel of individuals who are going to dive deeper into a few of these different topics at different depth. We won't pretend to cover everything. We won't try to come up with the solutions, but to share the experiences and engage in a provocative conversation about how we can move forward with this opportunity. As we begin, I'd like to introduce Puneet Joshi, who will kick us off with a lightning talk, sharing some of the work that he's been driving with the Agricultural Technology Institute in Ethiopia. Puneet, if I can invite you to the microphone.
Thank you, Robin, and good morning, all of you. Pleasure to be speaking to you all on this very relevant and important topic on food insecurity. I'm a practitioner of DPI. I work for the digital public good called OpenG2P. OpenG2P is an open source platform to deliver social benefits and, in general, benefits from government to person. In the backdrop of this topic, I will cite an example, a real use case of how a DPI approach can address some of the concerns related to food insecurity. Of course, I am in no way suggesting that DPI can solve all the problem related to food security. It is a very complex topic in itself. However, if digitization or digital systems are designed or architected with an infrastructure approach, surely the impact can be exponential, as we have seen in other countries. In my understanding of food security, the food security is impacted by the following, I would say, factors or dimensions. One is the supply of food, whether there is enough food available, whether there is enough production. Second is the affordability, whether people have access, both physical and economic access to food. Third is whether the food is nutritious enough for the humans, the ability of the body to utilize food. And fourth, whether all these three factors can be sustained over a period of time. Here is an example of the work we are doing with Agricultural Transformation Institute, Ethiopia, where we have set up a farmer registry, or it's called farmer profile. This farmer registry contains data of farmer, like crops they are growing, the land they own, income, etc. It also contains history of how things have changed for the farmer. As you can see, I've mentioned reusable infrastructure over there, and I'll talk about it. Now, the data from this registry is fed into other systems, like the crop advisory system and markets information system, and so on, e-voucher system. So the data will be fed into the other systems, ultimately for the advisory and services to farmers to increase their productivity and provide them protection. And you can also see that there is a FIDA ID integration with the registry. FIDA ID is a national ID of Ethiopia. It is a unique ID. In fact, it is based on MOSIP. So this is another example. It's an example of how different DPGs in a DPI can interact with each other and integrate. And on the left side, you see the farmer registration process. Now, this is where the data comes into the registry. There is an offline mechanism where the agents can go to the field. They are going to the fields where there is no connectivity, and they are taking the data of farmers in a no connectivity zones, and that data is coming into the registry. And as we speak, there is live, every day this registration process is going on. And the data can also feed into this registry from other systems like National Rural Land Administration Information System. So what is DPI about this? Oh, by the way, these are some of the pics of how the registrations are happening on the ground. Just with an Android phone, without even connectivity, we are kind of registering people. We are hoping that this system will positively impact around 17 million farmers. So talking about DPI, so what is DPI about this? I have picked up two tenets of DPI which are applicable here. One is reusability and other is ease of data sharing. Now we have heard Pramod in yesterday's talk, mention several times that if an infrastructure is not reusable, it is not DPI, right? And one of the factors which I feel affects reusability of data and infrastructure is that the data gets kind of stale or not updated over a period of time, and it just is not useful for other departments or other use cases. In fact, the same department sometimes don't find the data useful anymore, and they end up collecting the data again and again. So what we have done in this registry is we have various dynamic update mechanisms to keep updating the data. In fact, we have mechanism for farmers to themselves log in and update the data, but that's later. So we want to make sure that an infrastructure like this is updated and the data is available when it's required and it's fresh. The other aspect, of course, is related to ease of data sharing. So data sharing is, we have been talking about it in DPI, but how easy is it to share the data with any other system? So we have APIs implemented as part of the registry where the other systems can pull data using APIs. They can also filter the data in different ways and consume it. So in that sense, this is I would say, the specific DPI part of this implementation. We have similar such implementations happening in the Ethiopian Disaster Recovery Commission, EDRMC, in Ethiopia, and where basically it's about food distribution to the affected areas. And similar system is being deployed with the DPI approach. Also in Zambia, we are working with Smart Zambia to implement a drought relief program. Again, the thought process being that the tenets of DPI should be followed so that the infrastructure becomes really useful and potentially, have a positive impact exponentially. One point, though, from yesterday's talk, Pramod Verma's talk, I'll just quote that again. He did mention that sharing of data between systems with APIs and so on is not enough to scale for a human population, right? And he was talking about credentialing and so on, and user owning the data. Yes, sure, we do have those features available in this registry where the farmer can download a verifiable credential and potentially use it for other services. So those features are there. However, I do believe that depends on the maturity of the digitization in a country. You have to deploy, DPI, which is commensurate with the maturity of the digitization. So those features are definitely there, and as the digital maturity improves, those features can definitely be used. But you have a start point. What we have done here is still a step up from what was there before, and we hope to kind of continue to provide such features and make the DPI impact a lot more as we go on. So that's it from my side, and I will be looking forward to hearing from our distinguished panel on other aspects of food security. I've just covered one aspect of it as to how DPI can positively impact the space. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Puneet. So I'd like to kick off the conversation with our panelists, and perhaps I can just move from left to right or right to left, depending which direction. Mr. Lambiardi, I'd like to start with you. Could you tell us a bit about the work you're doing in Indonesia and what you've seen in terms of the opportunity for DPI, as well as some of the challenges alongside the progress and the impact to date?
Yes, thank you very much, Robin, for the questions. First of all, I'm Willie. I'm from TBI Indonesia, currently leading on the digital and also health work streams. So to your questions, I think DPI is currently emerging innovations that we are currently pursuing, particularly from the government of Indonesia. Of course, this is an exciting time, but also it poses a question of how we can utilize this DPI for other sectors. With regards to all the aspects and the elements of the DPI, the progresses are currently being centralized by some of the line ministries, but there's also there's a lot of learning curve, particularly when it comes to how to build the DPI from scratch, right? So the impacts itself, we can see that as you can see in the books, the digital ID that we have recently launched, pushed by the Ministry of Home Affairs, is one of the best examples of how we can utilize the DPI for the betterment of the other sectors in Indonesia.
Wonderful. Honorable P.S. Ramashamole, may I turn to you and ask a similar question, but how are you looking at the role of digital public infrastructure in addressing food security, strengthening food systems in Lesotho?
Thank you, Romin, for having us here today. And good morning, everyone. My name is Kanon Ramashamole. I'm the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Information, Communication, Science, Technology, and Innovation in Lesotho. From our perspective, if I were to reflect on our question, our digital transformation is fully aligned with the government's nutrition priorities. And we have identified DPI as one of the approaches that we can use to basically deal with the challenges that we are seeing. We have issues with fragmented data that we are not able to use to efficiently distribute agricultural inputs. We have noticed that there's a lot of exclusion for farmers, especially those in the rural areas, because from my personal observation, I can see that only the people in the urban areas are actually benefiting from this government scheme. So we are looking at DPI specifically. We worked with GovStack early this year. So we identified agricultural extension services as one of the pilot projects that we want to kickstart. And we believe that with proper information sharing, we can actually close that inclusion issue. But we are also working with CDPI because we want to have, when we move to online, we want to have the ability to deal with online transactions efficiently. So we're working with them to build our digital ID. Specifically, we are looking at verification and EKYC. So with EKYC, and hopefully if we can manage to also introduce the voucher system for distribution of inputs, then we will be able to know exactly who's benefiting from those schemes. And we are in the process of preparing for trials. We're hoping to start the trial with digital ID and payment gateway early next year.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And Undersecretary, I'll turn to you. Your reflections from Cambodia, what you're working on, where you're seeing progress, and some of the opportunities at your fingertips for DPI.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Rapid Sun from the Ministry of Posts, and Telecommunication of Cambodia. In Cambodia, we now embark of the digital transformation to build the digital economy and society. And the Ministry of Post and Telecommunication is working hard on building the infrastructure to lay the foundation for the digital government and for the digital economy. But when it comes to the digital transformation in the agriculture, so we are lag behind. Does not take the opportunity to adopt the DPI or any solution in terms of the to assist the agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture recently has adopted the strategic plan for the digital transformation 2024-2028. So that allows them to lay to lay the foundation to build the infrastructure to support the agriculture, to build the capacity for the farmer, and to utilize the data from the agriculture. And in fact, in Cambodia, we, in terms of building the digital government and digital economy, we adopt the DPI for data exchange, for the eKYC, and also we build the payment online payment for inter banking transaction. And besides adopting the existing solution from the DPI, we also develop our own DPI. So we call verify.gov.kh that allow allow all the government document to be provided to the public using the QR code. So there is no more required you go to the local office for notarization of the government documentation. So now we try to work with all the other ministry to adopt this verify, to integrate with the verify.gov.kh into it. And especially we are now working with the Ministry of Agriculture that all their licensing or permit may be a request from a business or from a farmer that is able to issue the document but integrate with the QR that allow scanning or verify of the document that we are still working on it. And we hope that with the DPI then it can accelerate our digital transformation, especially in the agriculture. But we also see the challenge because the farmer, the digital literacy level is not yet in the level that they can adopt or take the solution. And also another is about the habit of the farmer, because in Cambodia, I think maybe not in Cambodia, but in all other countries that farmer they are used to do anything that they used to do. When you ask them change, even though change the crop, the seed, they hardly adopt it. Even though they know that the climate change, the issue of a drought or flood, they still follow the traditional. Yes, that's all from me.
Thank you. This theme has come up in a few different discussions of linking the technology to the change in behavior and practices. Thank you very much. Director Idrissa Dia, I would like to turn to you. And the role of multilateral development finance institutions is critical within this DPI space. Curious to learn more about how the Islamic Development Bank is adopting digital technology solutions. And perhaps something you've mentioned, there's a work you're doing in mainstreaming Earth observation technologies in that role. So perhaps you could speak to these 2 points so we can learn more about what the IDB is doing in this regard.
Good morning to everybody, and thank you, Robin, for having us. IDB is a South-South development, multilateral development bank. So as such, many of our member countries rely heavily on agriculture for their economic development, in one hand, but also in the sustainable meaning attempt to develop the livelihood of the populations who, in large majority, also still rely on agriculture. In that sense, we have developed recently a program of about 10.5 billion US dollar to support agriculture and food security in the wake of the crisis we have recently witnessed in the world. That is in one hand. Second, we have approved end of last year our first ICT and digital inclusion and digital development strategy for 2024-2027. And two axes of this strategy pertain to one, mainstreaming ICT and digital development, digital technologies in all sectors we operate in. I was discussing with Willie in the morning about what we do in health, for instance, in Indonesia, where the place of digital technology is fundamental. So we have decided to mainstream ICT and digital technology systematically for education, health, but with a focus on agriculture and education. That is one hand. In the second hand, it's investing in the enabling infrastructure in the form of DPIs to make sure that countries can attract, can have the foundational infrastructure to attract private sector, including in the agricultural sector, to help developing this sector in a sustainable way. Now, as part of the means to develop, to deploy that strategy on the field, we are piloting a certain number of initiatives. One, we were again discussing that is an initiative on smart villages development in Indonesia and Pakistan, where we will heavily invest in the enabling infrastructure to allow the rural people to be connected and access to services like education and health in a remote manner. And we are working on that because partnership in this matter is important, not only with government, but with institutions like ITU, UNDP, and others that might be even represented in this room. Now, on the ground, we are piloting some also of the currently trendy digital technologies, like using remote sensing methods and approaches for precision agriculture, monitoring the state of the land, the water availability in irrigation scheme in order to adapt the water usage to the particular context of the country and seasonal variation in order to have stability and efficacy in developing the crops. We have examples like this in Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Uganda, and so forth. So if the discussion permits, we may be able to elaborate on that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. This link of DPI is the enabling infrastructure for innovative applications across health, education, agriculture, very powerful. For a moment, I'm going to turn to the audience, but this is just to give you a warning. We'd love to have one or two of your questions after I go through the next round with my panelists. So this is just to give you a heads up so you can prepare. I know all hands will be up, but we'll only have time for maybe one or two questions. But before we do, I'd like to return to my colleagues here and ask a follow-up question. As you're working on these solutions, implementing strategies, designing strategies, what is one area where you're seeing either a distinctive challenge or an untapped opportunity that you think doesn't have enough attention as we're thinking about the future of DPI in addressing food systems? I'm happy to, since I will say, Willie, we had I don't want to preempt your answer, but we did have a discussion about data exchanges, so perhaps I'll continue with the same order.
Okay. Yeah, I think personally for myself, I've been doing agriculture projects for about 4 to 5 years before I entered to the public services, and I see that agriculture is quite a complex sector. It is certainly have this very unique value chains from the upstreams to the downstreams. Even before the upstreams, there are a few components that needs to be taken care of considerably, like seed handling and so on and so forth. Each of those value chains can be optimized through the power of DPI, one of which is, of course, the data exchange. When it comes to the beneficiaries, how to empower the farmers, I think the honorable speaker from Cambodia already highlighted what would be the impact of DPI when it comes to providing, for instance, technical assistance for the farmers and the subsidies. Of course, the digital ID and also digital payment to some extent would be very, very crucial in enabling those kind of systems. So, of course, when we're looking at the perspective of what are the challenges, it's how to deepen the use cases of DPI for the agriculture sectors. And uniquely for Indonesia, we have these twin sectors, not only empowering the agriculture, but also the aquacultures, because that's one of the industries that are also quite sort of, being left out, but it's quite important to Indonesia. Probably to give you some context as well, agriculture and aquaculture contributes to almost like 14% of our GDP. So it's a huge industries. And most of the workers, smallholders, are working in these very specific sectors. So we're talking about feeding at least 44 million people in Indonesia. So, and government has a lot of programs to provide subsidies. And the challenges here is how to make sure that there's going to be a targeted interventions from the government down to the right beneficiaries. And of course, when it comes to educating the farmers on how to use the smart agricultures, the digital agricultures, technologies, is also another facet, right? So when we're building the DPI, we also need to make sure that the users, the end users, in this case the farmers, and also all the players that will support the farmers, need to understand how to leverage it. So we're talking about how to also provide the better educations or the digital literacy for the whole wide users. Lastly, I think the challenges when it comes to demography, because we're talking about digital aspects where it's very much geared towards innovative use of sensors and all the devices that might not probably compatible with the older generations. And because most of the farmers in Indonesia are done by mostly the productive group of age, there's also the increasing needs to have a more creative way of teaching all these farmers in order for them to be able to, as simple as how to use the QR code, for instance, to make the payment, and also how to make them well-versed in reading the data, right? Last but not least, I think when it comes to the government, we are very appreciative that there are a lot of assistance given by World Bank, for instance, and then also from the Islamic Development Bank. But that's also creating another set of challenges when it comes to helping the government to create a better governance and also policies and regulations. As I mentioned earlier, DPI is an emerging topic in Indonesia. We just recently launched the digital ID systems. In fact, last Monday, we just launched our portal, citizen portal, still in an alpha release. But this is also geared towards how to mainstream the use of DPI for all, we're talking about 280 million people of Indonesia. So there are a lot of challenges, but there's also opportunities for us to collaborate, particularly with the private sectors and development agencies like Islamic Development Bank or World Bank in this house.
Thank you. Honorable Ramashamale.
Thank you, Robin. We also have a lot of challenges, but I'll talk only to two. The stagnant productivity and access to markets. When we are doing this DPI thing, we are basically looking at it in such a way that it will help the farmers get real-time information on weather, disease outbreaks, crop management, or even information on planning for the next seasons. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have prioritized digitization of extension services so that we'll be able to boost productivity. This is a big challenge for us because in the past 2 years, the government has actually tripled the budget for the Ministry of Agriculture. But we don't see tangible results. So we have to maybe come in with digital interventions because we believe people are not getting information in time. The other one is access to market. Those who can produce, they find it difficult to sell to the big local supermarkets and export markets because traceability is a big issue. So with EKYC, we are hoping that will be the foundation to start ensuring that we have traceability, a mechanism in place. And if we can get it right from the beginning, then we'll move to the next phase where we introduce technologies like blockchain so that at least we have a trusted system. We hope that will open up the market for our farmers. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Mr. Sun?
For the challenge of adopting the DPI, we can see that there are many stakeholders to build the DPI ecosystem. So the government is already embarked on the national digital transformation, and the Ministry of Agriculture also led the strategy for that. But one thing I see that the engagement from the private sector, also from the software company, solution company, because they may not be yet to catch up the idea of the DPI. They may tend to develop a silo a system when come to any solution to tackle to the challenge, the problem in agriculture. So these may require awareness or maybe build a stronger cooperation, a more stronger cooperation between the local industry, the local company with the global that they are working on the DPI. Because otherwise the capacity or the knowledge of the DPI in the local may not be exposed for the DPI. And another is about the limited resource of skilled people and also the financial that to adopt this. So I see we need to work together between the government, the private, the development partner to plan and roll out the DPI. Especially it should be the DPI in agriculture need to connect to the existing ecosystem of the national DPI architecture as a whole. That one of the agriculture digital transformation is a building block for the whole ecosystem. We should not invest and build one ecosystem silo or separately from the national ecosystem. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Director Dia, I'll turn to you with a question around challenges either you face within the Development Bank IDB or that your member countries are facing, or opportunities that you're seeing amongst your member countries.
Thank you, Robin, again. I think the colleagues have mentioned some of the challenges that are quite common to our member countries, and the challenges are many. But I will maybe just take quickly 4 of them. One is the challenge of funding, because building the enabling infrastructure requires significant upfront investment, which many countries today cannot afford, especially post-COVID, with the lack of fiscal space that many governments are confronted with the explosion of the social demands and the competing priorities. So we, as development funds institution, we are also struggling to find the proper way to bring the soft resources that would come to fund something that we can consider as digital public goods. But that still requires that amount of investment for countries that have difficulty to borrow. That's the first impediment. The second is the one of digital infrastructure availability. If you look about internet, for instance, connectivity concerning rural areas mostly, where the farmers are located, is very poor. The penetration rate is low. When the connectivity exists, it is of poor quality. And also the challenge associated to that is the one of affordability for populations, rural areas that are most often the most economically deprived. So even if the broadband access is there, do they have the means to access in an affordable manner? Do they have the means to afford the devices that allow you to connect? Because having the connectivity, the broadband is something, but do you have the device that allows you to connect properly? That's another issue. So it's the limit that is created by poverty in the rural areas. Third is the issue of digital literacy. Many of the farmers, if not most of them, are illiterate or at low level of literacy compared to people in the big cities. So it creates a barrier. Willie was mentioning that, and the colleagues touched base on that. It's quite difficult then to appropriate the solutions that are available, and which brings us also again to the issue of the local design and the local content in those systems to allow the people also to be connected. Lastly, and I will stop there, it's about the fragmentation of data. Yesterday, there has been a lot of discussion from CDPI about fragmentation at the global level, but there is fragmentation at the local level, and Rapid was somehow mentioning that. For instance, when you want to develop your agriculture in an efficient manner, the Ministry of Water, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Ministry in charge of Infrastructure Energy have to talk to each other, and their systems talk to each other. But this is not the case. Most of the time, each of these ministries have its own system and data platform that do not talk to each other. So it is difficult then to realize that level of integration that would allow free flow of data, which is one of the inherent goals of establishing DPIs. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So the funding, if I caught the 4, the funding and financing aspects amongst member countries, the availability and affordability of the broader, more broadly defined connectivity, the literacy that's associated with using these systems, and the fragmentation that exists. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to the audience, and as I do, I might steal a few more minutes from our session. As I turn to the audience for maybe 1 to 2 questions that you might have for our panel, I'll also tee up just some closing thoughts. So as we ask the question, I'll request 1 or 2 questions. I believe we have someone who can bring the mic around. And then as we come back, I'll ask each of you to choose which question you want to answer. Maybe you have reflections on both. But also as you do your closing thoughts, what is one issue that you would like this room to take away as an area you'd like either support, you'd like to push the thinking on, or an area that you think could really help advance? We know there are many. We know we haven't answered all the questions that are out there, but just one area that you'd like to draw attention to as we close. But before we do, perhaps we can, do we have someone who could assist? Do we have any questions from the audience this morning? we've given you plenty of time to think about these powerful topics and the complexities of DPI. Everyone is very quiet. Are you sure? You got up at 9:30 this morning for the session. No questions? Okay, then maybe I can turn back to the panel for just your closing thoughts. And Puneet, we'd love your reflections as well. In fact, maybe we start with you and work around this way. But what is the one message you'd like this group to take away, or that you'd like to continue the conversation about?
Thank you. It's wonderful to see the DPI thought process now in the countries that are represented here to solve, larger problems, and banks like yours supporting the initiative. As a technologist, as an implementer, my viewpoint would be that when you're doing digital systems in your country, any digital system, for example, we must review it from the DPI perspective. So when the RFPs are created and so on, if they don't inbuilt the DPI way of doing things, then the systems will probably not get implemented that way. And I think that's a challenge, because when I was talking to certain system integrators, they said that when the RFP comes to them, it is already written in a way it's not really DPI, and they have to respond to it. So the awareness in the government and the departments to craft the requirements such that it follows the tenets of DPI would be a start point, I would say. Of course, if you can think of the entire architecture in your country, how things will be linked together and come up with something, it's fantastic. But not every country will be in that level of maturity and understanding, or it may be just too difficult to do that. But you could start small. Whichever digital systems you are developing, review it from the perspective of, does it have data sharing, does it have privacy, and all the tenets that we are talking about digital DPI. And surely, when the need comes, these systems then will be connected for use cases which we haven't even imagined, probably. But as long as they are following the tenets, one can expect exponential impact, as we have seen in India, for example. A lot of use cases were not even thought of. But because the things were done in the DPI way, the utility just expanded. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Dio?
Thank you, Robin. I think if the motto of the SDGs is to leave no one behind, we should build strong partnership around making sure that everybody, everywhere, including our farmers in the most remote areas, have access to digital connectivity infrastructure with the appropriate level of digital literacy. And that should be leading us to build a strong coalition about achieving this goal, because partnership does matter in this area. The needs are so huge and the imperatives are so urgent that together we can all make it happen if we join hands together.
Thank you.
Yes, for me, just add to that, I think for the DPI adoption, we need to ensure the sustainability. It is very important when you roll out in the country, in the developing country. So the sustainability and ownership is the key, important that to ensure the successful of the DPI adoption. And for this, the partnership and capacity building between the partner to allow the local company to take over of this operation or maintenance of the DPI. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. For me, I think the big takeaway is also the issue of sustainability. and also the awareness that DPI cannot exist in vacuum. We have to build the whole digital ecosystem around it, especially as the director pointed out, the issue of connectivity. Let's not just give connectivity, but let's it be a meaningful connectivity that can be used. We also have to ensure that we have the right strategies for accessing the services that are put over DPI, because not everyone can afford to have a device. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I think there are two key takeaways, and probably this is me taking my head as a farmer. The first one, I think, the beauty of DPI is that it allows the all sectors to participate, to innovate, and to contribute. And this is exactly what agriculture sector needs, because we have so many commodities that we can, trial with the use cases of DPI. And this is what, for instance, Punit and myself, for instance, like as a technologist and farmer needs to work hand in hand. And particularly for the technologists to understand from the user standpoint. So emphasizing on the user-centeredness, so that the solutions that we are building in deepening the DPI would be can be used by the users, by the end users. So I think let's push on that collaborative mindset, and we'd love to hear more from people on the audience who are working on these sectors to continue progressing on this innovations in other commodities. Second, I think addressing the government agencies. There are honorable people here who are working directly on shaping the policies and regulations. I think this is also equally important for the government agencies to support the R&D departments, acknowledge that there's a need to modularize the solutions and accept that as a new standards moving forward. Because there are some instances, I have to admit, for instance, in government of Indonesia, there's a need to over-regulate and over-control things that probably counterproductive to development of this DPI and whatever technology innovations moving forward. So I appreciate, for all these gentlemen here that already have this open-mindedness to make sure that the adoptions of DPI in agriculture sectors and food security can be work hand in hand with the technologists and farmer like me. And of course, last but not least, from the people like from World Bank and also Islamic Development Bank, these are what we called as the people who support from behind, because providing the financing is very, very key, particularly for the global south countries that require not only funding, but also shared expertise so that we don't embark on the wrong, we don't put our feet on the wrong doors. So this is crucially important, and that's why I think going back to the first point, being collaborative with everyone in the space, technologists, farmers, government agencies, and as well as development partners are important.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank my panel. I hear a very powerful theme in these closing remarks about the integration of DPI and a recognition that it sits within a broader ecosystem in order to drive the changes we want to see in strengthening food systems and addressing food security. In particular, as Sunit, you mentioned, taking the principles of DPI, integrating them right from the outside into some of the projects, programs, RFPs that we deliver. You've highlighted the partnerships and the role of thinking deeply about how rural connectivity is such a critical underlying driver of ensuring the success of these solutions. Thinking about the sustainability, the partnerships, the capacity building, recognizing that DPI does not sit in a vacuum. I think that encapsulates my view of how you place it into a broader ecosystem and the considerations that surround it. And finally, creating that space for a user-centric approach and ensuring that policy is laying the groundwork for innovation in this space. I also just want to thank the participants once again for joining us this morning, and thank you very much. I hope this conversation has not answered all of your questions, but instead provided you with some examples and sparked conversations that we can continue after this session and in the coming days, weeks, months ahead. Thank you again to my panelists, and thank you to the organizers of the Global DPI Summit.
Thank you.